The Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie, and I am so privileged that you're joining me today. We are moving through A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles is a book that I read I guess, actually, at the beginning of 2025. I really started reading it, and even earlier around Christmas of 24. And the book is dense, and it feels like we're going to the gym mentally, spiritually, even emotionally in some ways, but really mentally and spiritually. That's how it's been for me reading this book. And so there's a workbook associated with it. And every single day this year, we're going live to read through the lesson together. And on the other side of it, we just talk through it and either do the exercise together or just move through some of the lessons that are in there. So I am actually going to start off this morning just doing a recap of the lessons that we've had so far, because each one builds on each other. In isolation, the lesson doesn't hold as much meaning as when you take the entirety into context. So let's start with lesson 1, and then we will move through lesson 18. Lesson 1: nothing I see in this room means anything. Lesson 2: I have given everything I see in this room all of the meaning that it has for me. Lesson 3: I do not understand anything I see in this room. Lesson 4: these thoughts do not mean anything. They are like the things I see in this room. Lesson 5: I am never upset for the reason I think. Lesson 6: I am upset because I see something that is not there. Lesson 7: I see only the past. Lesson 8: my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. Lesson 9: I see nothing as it is now. Lesson 10: my thoughts do not mean anything. Lesson 11: my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. Lesson 12: I am upset because I see a meaningless world. Lesson 13: a meaningless world engenders fear. Lesson 14: God did not create a meaningless world. Lesson 15: my thoughts are images that I have made. Lesson 16: I have no neutral thoughts. Lesson 17: I see no neutral things. And now, lesson 18: I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. The idea for today is another step in learning that the thoughts which give rise to what you see are never neutral or unimportant. It also emphasizes the idea that minds are joined, which will be given increasing stress later on. Today's idea does not refer to what you see as much as how you see it. Therefore, the exercises for today emphasize this aspect of your perception. The 3 or 4 practice periods which are recommended should be done as follows. Look about you, selecting subjects for the application of the idea for today as randomly as possible, and keeping your eyes on each one long enough to say, I am not alone in experiencing the effects of how I see blank. Conclude each practice period by repeating the more general statement, I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. A minute or so or less will be sufficient in each practice period. I'm going to repeat the lesson and the first 2 paragraphs one more time just to really drill it in. Lesson 18, I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. The idea for today is another step in learning that the thoughts which give rise to what you see are never neutral or unimportant. It also emphasizes the idea that minds are joined, which will be given increasing stress later on. Today's idea does not refer to what you see as much as how you see it. Wow. I'm so excited about this because over the last couple of weeks, what's been building upon each other has been this concept around the power of thought, how our thoughts project out on what we see, and what we think about and thus what we see are never neutral. It's either life giving or life depleting. It's either true or an illusion. And this today is starting to now add in a layer of we're not alone in this process. And the thought of us being isolated in our world can be so damaging. Isolation really often stems from a place of ego. If our ego is in the driver's seat, It's the narratives usually run. It's kind of like a script, the script of ego. And each one of us has a slightly different variation of the script of ego based on our childhood experiences. So often, ego sounds like no one else understands, no one gets me, I'm alone in this, and it's very self isolating. Always, ego is powered by fear. And so, this concept of I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing fundamentally goes against ego. And so, the reason why practice periods every single day are really important in introducing these new concepts is because ego is pushing back. Ego does not like this lesson today because it wants to be isolated. It actually wants to be singular in our experience because that's where ego derives its worth. It derives worth in being this, and it's not even unique because I actually do believe each one of us is created uniquely. However, there's a spirit, there really is like a spirit of love and a spirit of fear. There's a spirit of separation rooted in fear that comes from ego versus a spirit of unity rooted in love that comes from God. And so it's effectively ego and God are in this war of who are we going to allow in our mind? Who are we going to allow to impact the way that we see the world? Because if they're in our mind, heart, and soul, that impacts our thoughts, and thus it impacts the way we see. Our thoughts are like our lens. And so what we think about, what we choose to occupy the cognitive space, but then also what we choose to dwell on emotionally. The feelings and thoughts both constitute 50%. So our cognitive IQ and our emotional EQ. We've got two dimensions of our brain, the right hemisphere, left hemisphere, and we have to pay attention to both. So I'm curious. I actually don't remember. I read a lot of the lessons last year in A Course in Miracles, and I don't know if she gets to this, but the concept of, okay, mastering my mind, but also mastering my soul. I must, and we all must, take control of the different faculties of us. And it's not controlling, again, rooted in fear. It's being curious and knowing what's going on so that our true self, the one that God made us to be in the first place, is at the helm of the ship. We're the ones at the wheel. We're the ones driving, not ego, not fear, not control, not even thoughts, and not emotions. Both our thoughts and emotions come into subservience to our ideal under God of who were we created to be in the first place. And so this getting to know our thoughts and getting to know our emotions, all of it is for the purpose of being able to have our true self be the one in the driver's seat. Because if we don't know what's going on inside of us, it's going to catch us by surprise, and it will subconsciously be the ones kind of ruling us. One of the chief lessons that we've been exploring over the last couple of weeks is how much the past actually does project in our thoughts than on the world we see. So much of our thoughts are actually predicated in past experiences. That's all we know. Every single thing. And I like I'm sitting here in my sister's basement right now. Here's a weight that she has. This weight, I see it through the past. I only know this because of the past. And that doesn't mean it's bad by any means, but it's important to realize that so often we're looking at ourselves and others through the lens of the past. Thus, we're projecting how they're going to behave and how we're going to behave based on the past. And it's almost fundamentally impossible to introduce something new. That's my alarm saying to go live for A Course in Miracles. We're doing it. It's fundamentally impossible to introduce something new if we've got the lens of the past through which we're viewing the world. So if our partner is trying to grow or change in an area, or we're trying to grow and change in an area, yet we're constantly looking at the world through the past, we cannot allow for them to come and be new. And we ourselves cannot be new. That's why the concept of death into rebirth is so important, because old things actually must die off in order for new things to be introduced. So these practice periods today, we're introducing a new concept, and then we're actually repeating it. And she says for about 60 seconds, 3 to 4 times a day. So I actually have 4 different alarms set on my phone for 60 seconds. And during that 60 seconds, regardless of what I'm doing, and we need to set our alarms at times where we actually can engage, but taking that time and actually taking some deep breaths and settling so much into the present moment. Even if I'm working, I just know that my alarm's going to go off at 12:30, and that's going to be the time where I just take a couple deep breaths and calm and effectively bring myself into my body into a place of peace, and then introduce this new concept. And the new concept, the lesson for today: I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. And this is the actual exercise we're supposed to do during these practice periods. Look about you, selecting subjects for the application of the idea for today as randomly as possible, and keeping your eyes on each one long enough to say, I am not alone in experiencing the effects of how I see, insert whatever you're seeing. And then conclude each practice periods by repeating the more general statement, I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. So with that, I just want to drop here in the chat. Good to see you guys. Zark, thank you for coming on. Grim, Robin, Grim, Mohammed, good to see you. Robin, thank you for coming on here and just looking at this conversation. 33, it is MW, good to see you guys. Peter Bruck, good morning. Thank you for coming on here. Maurice, Shadow, Aussie, Joe Beck. Just kind of catching up here on some of the conversations. Benny, good to see you. Todd, BTW. I'm just looking honestly if there's any. Okay, Mohammed, you said rebirth is just an accident. I'm curious about when you say rebirth, I'm curious about what that means for you. When I mean rebirth, I'm talking about the mental and emotional pathways inside of us that effectively need to die and be reborn. So it's amalgamating all of those different pathways constitutes you and I being reborn. But when you break it down into practical application, what does it mean to be reborn? It's taking the old programs that were handed to us, whether we observed them and they developed that way, or we inherited them in childhood and through experiences. We go through so many experiences in childhood and much less through the rest of our life. But childhood's just such a formative time. We go through experiences that have unprocessed emotions associated with them that form a program, a pathway that solidifies into effectively a brick that can really prevent us from connection, from love, because it was powered by fear. We had a little trauma or a big trauma in our life that we haven't moved through or processed. And then that puts together, like, I think of it as a brick. And these bricks build up time after time and over time of these moments in our lives where we experienced pain, we experienced a broken promise, a betrayal, and then slowly, little by little, these bricks solidify and build this wall. And then I'm sitting here looking at you, but through my wall. And now you're sitting over there looking at me through your wall. And then we're trying to communicate and wondering why it's so hard to do so. So in order to actually go through the rebirth process, those bricks actually need to be dismantled, and there's a death there. And in that process of death, we then can actually experience the freedom that comes from no longer existing within the confines and chains of the past. And so when I talk about rebirth, that's what I mean. And sometimes it can be accidental. We learn something new and we're maybe in therapy and we learn a new way of thinking. That's actually, though, when we think about it, going to therapy is intentional. So it's an intentional pursuit. Even sitting here having this conversation, y'all, we are intentionally pursuing the working out of our mind. And so I think perhaps it may feel accidental at times, which that's even better if we're so used to the process of rebirth that it feels accidental. But it really so often for many of us requires intention. I have to intentionally set my alarm to do these practice periods. I have to intentionally go and do vertical alignment every morning, which is bringing my beliefs and behaviors, my mind, body, and soul into alignment to act in subservience to my ideals. It is more natural for me to kind of deviate and look to the right and to the left and have everyone else tell me how to live. It is much harder for me to allow for my own ideals and who God made me to be the acting agent and my own source of meaning rather than looking to everyone else to define who I should be and to define my worth. And so I have to be intentional to pursue that. So with that, um, I'm just looking here. Benny, I'm just looking here at your chats. Mm. It's so interesting. I actually, it's interesting. You're talking about being alone. We had this conversation 2 nights ago. Yeah, it was Thursday night. Um, Friday night. It was Friday night. We had a conversation actually on here on the Knowing Show. I go live in the morning to talk about A Course in Miracles, and then I go live in the evening for just a longer show. And man, we talked about grief, and we really dove deep and really got specific and personal. And it was probably the most meaningful time I've ever had. And all of us are alone in our own houses, our own rooms. And yet there was such a sense of, I just got chills thinking about it. It was so comforting to know that people from all over the world were showing up. And, I remember the names of those folks who were vulnerable and open and sharing, and I was even thinking about them this morning. Just there were 3 people in particular, there was maybe 15 of us. It wasn't many. Like even now we've got 17 people joining, and that's just that I can see, like there's more people elsewhere, but it's not, I'm not going after the big numbers. The goal is community, and the goal is that we're coming alongside each other and not having to do this work alone. The intentional pursuit of growth, the intentional pursuit of healing, and coming to know who we are for the purpose of love, that we don't have to do that alone. Yet we have the ability to, I'm just going to go for it. We have the ability to heal on our own. We actually have the ability to learn the tools to go in and reprogram those old pathways that keep getting in the way and keep causing us pain or harm. Or we have the power to go and redo relationships and remake them into something that is life-giving rather than life-depleting. And we have the power over our thoughts. But it's so much better to do it in community and learn how in community. We're not taught emotional intelligence. We're taught how to cultivate our minds from 4 years old. We're taught to read, 3 years old, and we're not taught how to breathe deeply and tend to our soul and our spirit. We get into depression, we get into these emotional states where it's like, how do I get out? It feels like you're sinking deeper and deeper and deeper into this hole of like emotional distress. And it's like, what do I do? How do I escape? And then we feel so isolated and so lonely because we just don't know. We just don't know how to tend to ourselves and how to give ourselves the care that we need. And so this is the point of this morning show and the evening show, is to learn the tools of effectively how to be our own caretaker, how to be our own parents, where maybe you had a great parent, maybe you didn't, but we get to come in and take care of ourselves, maybe even for the first time in our lives. And it's like this person on the inside is just waiting to be really tended to and cared for. And we don't have to wait for someone else to come in and take care of us. We get to do it for ourselves. And if we're lucky, God willing, we do find other people who can love us and tend to us too, but they're not even going to know how to love us. They're not even going to know how to tend to us if we don't know how to do it ourselves. We train people how to treat us in so many ways. We raise the standard or we lower the standard, and then people come in and meet that. It's very rare to find somebody who comes in and says, actually, I'm going to treat you better than you treat yourself because I see that you're worthy. And the people who are like that, keep them around. That's a dime a dozen, if that. But that's what's so cool, is that we have the opportunity to elevate our own standard of treatment by the way that we engage with ourselves. So we have to model that for other people if we want to be treated better. But first, it starts with us going inward. It starts with us doing this work and asking questions around why am I feeling this way? What am I feeling in the first place? And then actually sitting with that. Some of the most impactful practices that I've seen other people implement, that I've implemented in my life is the process of just writing and journaling and actually getting it out, because if I don't get it out, I can't really it's kind of like pulling out your thoughts and putting it on paper and then looking at it and being like, "Oh, I didn't know I believed that. I didn't know I had that thought. I didn't know that, man, that really triggered me. Now I know why." It's like following the yellow brick road down to the root why. Why does that brick, which I'm now looking at the rest of the world through, why does that exist in the first place? What happened? And sometimes what happened isn't that significant, but it was really significant to our 6-year-old self or 7-year-old self. And we don't realize that that 6 or 7-year-old self is actually at the helm of the ship. And so we need to lovingly help that 6 and 7-year-old self that know that in that moment of being really activated and being triggered. It's like when we start going down that hole, that emotional hole, and we're like, "I can't get out, I don't know how to." So often it's actually in order to not keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, we actually just need to pause and sit with whatever it is at that moment that we're feeling, because until we sit with it, we're gonna keep suppressing it, and the hole just gets deeper and deeper. And so in sitting with it, we're actually giving voice and shedding a light. It's like shining a light on the dark places. It can't hide anymore. And then we start to come to know the truth of what is the going on in the inner world and like the inner architecture of our soul and mind. And then we start to be able to reclaim and take the power back. And when I say take the power back, it's when we were 6, 7, 10, 15, 20, when we had our heart broken or someone betrayed us. And we solidified this brick, that brick, and technically that person still that moment has power over us, because now we're looking at the entire world through that lens. And it's so hard because in that moment of being so hurt and in so much pain, it now becomes a trigger point where at any moment someone could say something and instantly we're taken right back to that moment in time that was so painful. Well, I don't want that moment in time that was painful to have power over me, because I actually don't want to return there. But we can't help but return there until we actually sit there and acknowledge what really happened and be truthful about it and then tend to ourselves. I'm just looking here at the chat. Mohammed, I just saw you say, till we die, no one could say what is after death. In my opinion, only after when a person dies, he gets the answer to the most important question of his life, but he can't share how we created. I completely agree with you. I think that there's so I mean, I it feels almost like an inner knowing, when we just know innately how much we don't know and how many answers we can't provide. That's why experience is the most powerful teacher, because it's like, well, I at least have experienced that. I at least know that to the extent that you can know something. So, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Andrew, good morning. Good to see you. Y'all, I hope you have a wonderful day. I am just going to repeat the lesson for today, lesson 18. I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my seeing. My hope is that every single moment that we practice this today, and even in the moments that we're not practicing it, we feel a little less alone. That we remember that the spirit of love is actually something that really can bind us together in unity, rather than the spirit of fear, which isolates and makes me think no one understands me. I'm completely alone in this journey. And the reality is that there's a lot more love and a lot more care for each other than we probably realize. So, John Jonas, good to see you. Chauncey, exiting stage left.